Hi, I'm Brooke Loesby, and thank you so much for joining the Law Life Coach podcast. We are here highlighting innovators who are making the law a healthier and happier place to practice. And joining us today is Mark Fingerman. Mark is an attorney, a mediator, and a mindfulness teacher. Mark, can you tell us a little bit more about what a mindfulness teacher is?
Sure. It can mean a lot of things these days. And my teaching is based on primarily three things. It's based on breath work. It's based on yoga and traditional yoga postures. And it's based on mindfulness awareness or mindful awareness, which one package that holds a lot of that is called emotional intelligence.
Something that maybe a lot of attorneys don't naturally come equipped with.
Well, I like to think we are naturally equipped with it, and we forget as we're raised in our culture. And what we're doing with mindfulness-based emotional intelligence is simply reminding us or reminding ourselves of our true nature.
I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you use this practice, especially for attorneys who are working in high stress environments, how they're able to use some of these practices to really promote their own well-being?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's part of my mission. What I do during the day, either teaching or working as a mediator, I just change clothes. Basically, I'm doing a very similar practice, which is really paying attention to what other people are doing, both externally and internally, and not like looking at them like like trying to figure them out or anything. It's just in a very open, spacious way, just paying attention to what matters to people, and in particular, paying attention to their emotional content, because so much of what lawyers do as professionals, and I was one of them, and did it very effectively, which is to divorce the emotional context from what we do, because there's this idea that it clouds reasoning and it gets in the way of getting the job done, and it's otherwise irrelevant, because all that really matters is essentially, I was a trial lawyer, litigator. What are the facts? What's the law? How do we put the two together? But then here's where you become aware of emotional intelligence. How do I then package that to present to a jury? How do I package that to present to a judge or an arbitrator? They're human beings. So we then, and every trial lawyer knows this, whether they realize that they're practicing emotional intelligence or not, they are. Because what they're doing is, here's the legal case. Now here's how I fluff it up and color it so that it appeals on an emotional level to the jury. What's fair, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's pleasant, what's unpleasant. So here's the thing that I tell my clients who are lawyers is that I don't care whether you do this cynically or for what I think are the right reasons. If you want to learn mindfulness just to become more effective as a lawyer in manipulating people, that's fine. Because if I'm doing the training, and if you do the practices that I teach, your heart's going to open up. You're going to become more compassionate and caring, whether you want to or not. It's just going to happen, because for a very simple reason, it just feels really good. And it's very effective, and people trust you, and they keep coming back to you, and you win, you get the job done. So
could you maybe share a story around that of somebody who's maybe put this to practice and some of the results they got?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because as a trial lawyer, I started to learn about this just by trial and error. Nobody was teaching me, but after my very first trial, I second chaired, and there were three other senior lawyers on the other side. And this is back in the day when you actually had camaraderie, and we went out to dinner with the other lawyers after the trial. In fact, this will really date me. We went to Chasen's in Los Angeles, which probably most people watching this would go, what? Some people know. Real old school, drinkery kind of restaurant that professionals, industry, entertainment industry people went to. And one of the lawyers turned to me and he said, I know I saw you watching how we were trying the case. He goes, my best advice to you is this: don't try to be me, don't try to be Greg, your senior partner. He goes, just find your own voice, find yourself. And so when I started preparing for my own trial, when I was first sharing my own trial, I was petrified. What is my voice? And finally I defaulted to just be authentic. Just don't make it up. Don't try to be anything. Just speak from the heart and do this. Tell the truth. Be authentic, true to my feelings and true to what I know to be true. And don't misrepresent anything, because it's, the old story. It's much easier to remember the truth than it is to remember your lies and keep track of them. And also, in my heart of hearts, I really care about justice. So it was kind of a natural for me. So in my trial practice, I won most of my cases. And the ones that I didn't win, I think for the most part, we knew they were losers. And I was just, sort of containing the damages. And so then once I got into mindfulness practices, studying yoga and then meditation and things of that sort, all of a sudden the light went on. I was like, wow, I've been on the right path. I just didn't know it. And now I've got tools to use for that. So my wish for anybody watching this is, get into this stuff a little bit. Find out how to open your heart. Find out how to be authentic and be truthful and sincere with people. And that's much better than trying to act or make stuff up or intentionally manipulate them emotionally. It's so much, and it feels great at the end of the day.
Yeah, you hear a lot of lawyers who are just unsatisfied with the practice of law, and especially it comes up with opposing counsel, and talk about a new way to communicate, like a heart-focused communication, to just be honest and open and heart-centered with opposing counsel. That could really change and impact your whole experience in being an attorney.
It can. It's a very tough road, though. I have to say, it's a tough road. When you're in a like-minded community, like if we had a community of, yogi lawyers, it'd be a wonderful world, right? Because we'd have a similar context. But here's where the real work comes in, is dealing with people who not only don't they want to do this, they're the antithesis. They're lying, cheating, they're doing whatever. They make everything personal. If you say it's Wednesday, they'll say it's Thursday. Going up against that on every level. My heart really goes out to lawyers these days, because it's becoming worse. It's becoming a more cynical, self-serving environment. Very difficult to not fall into playing at that level. But it's not just a nobler thing to rise above it, it's more effective. For example, when somebody's bullying you, whether it's in person or in an email or something, the most effective thing you can do is just nod and listen and not react to them, and just let them run out of steam.
Because that's really the only thing we have control over, is our reaction.
Exactly. And if you look historically, Gandhi and his movement threw the British out of India without firing one shot. And he did it by maintaining presence and holding space for these people. And he would just nod to them and he'd say, I'm sorry you feel that way. I can see you're in pain, and words to that effect. And it didn't fight back and stayed strong. He wasn't a weak man. He was a little guy, but he physically got beat and stuff and stood up to it. So anyway.
Yeah, so we really have to be warriors in this practice of law, to be able to use these practices, these meditation techniques. I remember when I was an attorney, every day was so stressful. My neurology just went off the charts. It was fight or flight, like every single day. And as a result of that, I was so burnt out that starting to try to even meditate, my mind was buzzing so much, it was very difficult to calm down. And I remember the way that I first started with yoga, actually, because I needed to do something with my body to just let my body rest and then allow my mind to be able to start to enter into a cozy and familiar place.
I think that's a very common experience, and that was mine as well. One of the things I teach, that my teacher taught me, is that you can't take somebody who is very high strung and heavily caffeinated and sleep deprived and have them close their eyes and try to quiet their mind.
Right.
One of two things will probably happen. They can't possibly quiet their mind because it's just like a rat on a wheel, or they're going to fall asleep, or both. They'll just be sitting there distracted, and they'll just start snoring because of all those things. So in what I've seen, what's been effective for me and what I teach and I've seen being effective is that the first thing to deal with is the body, like you said, and the nervous system, calming that down with, and it doesn't have to be yoga, but the breath work is, I guess it doesn't have to be breath work. I don't know what else replaces that. It's so effective, is learning breathing techniques that calm the nervous system down. And then getting some form of exercise. I mean, yoga is great. It's very, but cycling, jogging, running, something cardio. To me, I can't just have yoga. It's not enough. I need some intense cardio like cycling or surfing, stuff like that. So it's first calm the body down, and then these practices are able to flourish and to take root. The other thing to keep in mind is, what is the mind and what's it doing? The goal of the meditation, of mindfulness-based meditation, is not to quiet the mind, although that happens from the practice. The goal is just to learn that we don't have to get caught in those churning thoughts, that's not our mind. That's one aspect of our mind. There's a deeper awareness that you become aware that it's there. It's this pool of stillness. And from this pool of stillness, we can watch the busy mind, or kind of just let it do its thing off to the side, and then pay attention to what we want to pay attention to, like our breath. We keep coming back to the breath. This trains us that we have the ability to not get caught in thoughts, to not get caught in emotions, but to stay in this sort of even plane, which, for lack of a better word, equanimity comes to mind. Stay in an equanimous state where you're present with the world, but not being thrown around by it quite so much, not being buffeted by it, able to stay calm, the wind kind of blowing through you instead of blowing you around.
So important for lawyers, and even more important right now in the middle of the 2020 quarantine, where a lot of people, I think, can feel victimized or out of control, especially with their thoughts and all the information that, we're being overwhelmed with, that tends to be pretty negative.
Yep. No, it's funny when people ask me, so how are you doing? And, to people that know me, I say, well, I'm actually doing quite well because I'm enjoying the fruits of 20 years of practice. I mean, I've literally spent the last 20 years preparing for this, because I got to tell you, I get it. And the fear that's out there and the uncertainty, I experience it. There are moments when I experience it myself, but I'm aware that I'm experiencing it, and I'll kind of sit with that for a while and then let go of it. And
I think that's the main point, is that we become observers of our thoughts. Exactly. And we realize that we are not a victim of our own mental patterns, that, neurons that wire together, they're fired together, they wire together. So we can continue to change those default neuron pathways based on our own affirmative directing of our mental thoughts.
You just touched on one of the core aspects of my work, and that underpins it. It's called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity. It means that no matter how old we are, we have the ability to generate new tissue. It's the brain, it works just like muscle tissue does, that when you use a certain region of it over and over again, it grows new tissue to support that activity. So they measure cortical thickness in people. And they, for example, musicians have a part of the brain that's thicker than other people. That's the part of the brain where music happens, and you have to remember notes and the colorations of tone and things like that. And so that is why developing mindful awareness. Sorry about that. I wasn't mindful to turn my phone off, was I, before the call? Developing mindful awareness is like weight training or strength training. It's a cumulative practice. The more you do it, the more you're able to do it, and the better and stronger you get at it. So people say, well, I can't sit for 20 minutes. And my response is, well, I don't want you to. Why don't you sit for 3 minutes, but do it every day? And then, go to 4 minutes when you're ready, and go to 5 minutes when you're ready.
Just like anything, we don't pick up the weight training and expect to go to 100-pound barbells, right?
Right. I mean, it's just, and here's the good part about it, or one of the interesting parts about it, is that it will work whether you think it will or not. It's not a belief system. You're structurally changing the way your body is. You're adding nerve tissue. You're teaching yourself to a new skill. It's kind of like, if you were trying to learn to ride a bicycle, but you thought you could never do it, and you kept practicing, eventually, it doesn't matter what you think, your body's own sense of self-preservation will require you to learn to balance on a bicycle. That little thin part of your mind that's doubting it will be overwhelmed by the deeper part of your mind that wants to preserve your life and pass your genes on. And so it'll learn to ride a bike, and although meditating is not exactly a life-threatening situation, although one of my teachers tells a story of when he was a monk living in an ashram in somewhere in the East. He had a bad habit of falling asleep in meditation, even when he wasn't sleep deprived. And you know how his teacher cured him of that? He had him sit on the edge of a well with his feet hanging over and meditate.
Self-preservation works, right?
Yeah. So, maybe, you can find some version of the well if you have that problem.
So I'm curious, Mark, because you're plugged into so many law firms too, and kind of have experienced the trend of, meditation at first, in this industry being very woo, very out there, and now starting to become a lot more accepted and even ingrained into the legal community. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of trends?
A little bit. You're right. I mean, it's kind of like what we're doing right now, using teleconferencing or video conferencing.
Mm-hmm.
This has been around for years and available to people for years. Lawyers are just figuring out that this can be effective now because of what's going on, because of the pandemic. It's an obvious tool that has been available that is so effective for all level of professionals, all professional fields. Meditation, mindfulness, breathing, all of that stuff, as effective as it is, I get a lot of interest from people, but very little follow through on it. I think that those of us in the profession that are doing this is still a very small percentage, even though it's so beneficial on every possible level. In terms of life satisfaction, lawyers, especially litigators, you hear are very unhappy and they're kind of trapped. They have their student loans to pay off, and now they have their expensive car they have to pay, and they start to develop a lifestyle. They call it the golden handcuffs, mm-hmm. right? And they feel trapped, but who's trapping who? There's people who manage to live fulfilling lives living in prison. Okay, and how could you live a fulfilling life in prison? Because you fully accept where you are and live in your present reality and live as humanely and ethically as you can with the people around you. So for lawyers who feel dissatisfied or under too much stress from their practice, look inside and look for ways to change, as you mentioned, how it is you experience what you're doing. Because how you respond is up to you. How you react is up to you.
Boy, that's the truth. You know, I've worked with many clients who come to me and they're really unhappy in their job. They say there's no way that this position is ever going to work for me. And working together, just by changing our own outlook, the way that we're perceiving the situation, it's funny because nothing else will change. The same people, the same attitudes, the same working conditions, but everything changes. Their whole demeanor changes, their attitude towards their work changes, their outlook, their happiness can all change just from a few switches up here.
And there's a cascading effect. If you're happier doing what you're doing, and if you feel comfortable doing what you're doing, other people can sense that. And they're going to give you, you know, if you're in a law firm and you're trying to, you know, to work your way up, guess what? If people like you, you're going to do better than if they don't like you. It doesn't matter if you're doing great work. If you're not a likable person, if you're unhappy with yourself and unhappy with everything else, guess what? You're not going to be very likable. You don't even like yourself. But once you get at least to a neutral place, and now, very important. I'm not saying you got to love what you're doing. It's important, and that's a great way to live if you can achieve that, to love what you're doing. But I'll settle for liking it if you can manage to like it. And as lawyers, we have such a wonderful opportunity to be of service to people. I mean, if we take our roles as professionals and as servants to heart and really put the client's interest first, and I used to train my associates, here's what matters, okay? Here's the pecking order. There's the firm, your clients, your family, then you. That's the order of importance. Your first obligation is to protect this firm, you know, and don't say that publicly because clients won't want to hear it, but that's your first obligation. Protect the interests of this firm. The second is to protect the interests of your client. Now, if you're protecting your client's interests and that's your foremost goal, you're probably going to be looking out for the firm. But sometimes the client's interests might diverge. So we want you to err on the side of protecting us. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, then your family, take care of the people that you care for, and then yourself. And guess what? If you take care of those three things, you're going to be happy because you're taking care of everything that matters, that supports you. And there you go. But if you're only looking out for yourself and your interests, your perceived interests, and getting things for yourself, it becomes evident to the rest of the world that that's what you're doing because you're not really engaged. You don't really care. You know, you're just playing a game. So that's a lot. That's easy to say, but it's a lot. But it's a shift that practice a little mindful awareness, you know, notice where you are and just keep reminding yourself of those things. Try it. All I can say to people is give it a shot.
I think that's right. And I think, you know, reminding ourselves to ask ourselves the right question. And that can be really, how can I be of service? How can I be of service to my firm? How can I be of service to my clients? How can I be of service to my family? And all that will be of service to ourselves.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, Mark, I could keep talking to you forever. Thank you so much for being on the show. How can the listeners find you?
Well, glad you asked that, Brooke. They could go to my website, which amazingly is called markfingerman.com, markfingerman.com. And that's my personal website for my functional mindfulness training. And then embedded in that is a link to my website for mediation, which is fingermanmediation.com. And it's all mindfulness based. And there's some good information on both sites, by the way. It's not just about promoting me, it's promoting the container, if you will, that I live in, this, you know, mindfulness and ethical and spiritual container. So yeah, that's how to find out more about me and to get in touch with me.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. And thanks to our listeners. And please subscribe to the Law Life Coach channel. And thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.